importance of mindset and preparation, right? If I'm going to anticipate, I can better respond and not respond in the moment, but have thought about this. How do I actually want to lead? How do I want to get creative? And then even the fake urgency piece, knowing what my BATNA is, we know obviously as negotiators, that's a critical tool of strength. And if I prepare my BATNA in ahead of time, oh, then I feel more, confident. I can rely on it when I need to. If they're saying, no, you're going to be fired. Okay, well, I've thought and I've done some preparation, right? The importance of getting these right, getting yourself into a good situation so you avoid a bad situation later. I want to talk a little bit about the bad situations. My wife graduated from nursing school, but began practicing in the local hospital last year. She loves the culture, the environment. We know that's not always the case. We know that medical professionals often find themselves or sometimes find themselves in bad or even toxic situations. Have you ever had a client kind of in that situation who wants to negotiate themselves out of their predicament? And what's your advice for doing that? That seems a lot stickier and harder to do.
I feel like that's half my negotiation, unfortunately. So yeah, I think there are twofold facets to this. One is on the front end, the more you can kind of have an exit strategy built into your contract, the better off you are. So the big things that come into play for physicians trying to negotiate out of situations are tail insurance. So I have had doctors have to pay more than they actually earned in the job to get out of the job, which is mind-blowing and insane. But I'm an obstetrician by background. Obstetric malpractice insurance is really, really, really expensive because if you are sued successfully for something, these are children who are going to live with things for forever. So they tend to be really expensive claims. And so to get out of a job, you may have to write a $100,000 check to pay for what's called tail insurance, which is insurance for things that happened before in case you get sued later. So insurance is a big golden handcuff for doctors. And making sure you have the right kind of insurance on the front end in your contract can really help you to be able to have safety leaving if you need to. Non-competes are a huge one. And there's all sorts of flurry about that. And this was one that got me. I stayed in a job that was very toxic for me for a solid year, maybe 2 years longer than I should have. And I was only there for 3. And a lot of what drove me to stay was I had a non-compete. I couldn't work and live in the area I lived in for at least a year if I left this job. And I had family reasons why I needed to stay in this community. So as a new grad, I felt like my choice is to be a doctor and suck it up, or to not be a doctor. And how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to pay the bills? So I stayed because those choices feel very like this is life or death. Like I can feed my family, or I can just have all these student loans that don't pay themselves, ruin my credit score, and live under a bridge. Like that was how my brain saw my 2 choices. And so I think being willing to negotiate that on the front end so it's less catastrophic is great, but also being willing to challenge yourself. Like, how much of a barrier is this? Is this non-compete really life or death? And for me, ultimately, I decided no, it wasn't. And I did travel medicine for a year while my non-compete waited its time out, because sometimes you can get away with pushing it, but you're always vulnerable to them suing you for violating it. And I was leaving the job from a position that I was confident I would be the one they made an example of. So for me, I had to come up with a plan for a year. And I was like, I can do travel medicine. And travel medicine, as we've heard a lot of over the COVID pandemic, especially from a nursing perspective, tends to pay more per day because it's PRN work. It's something that's not reliable. You don't get benefits. You don't get all those things. So it has to be compensated better. So I could do that 2 weeks a month and take care of my family. And it was not optimal. Like I didn't want to be away from my 4 and 7-year-old every other week, but it was survivable. And what it bought me was the freedom to do a job that is better fitted for me, to do a job that I'm now home every night and I'm happy and engaged where I wasn't before. And so I think being willing to challenge yourself on what your possibilities really are is important here, but protecting yourself on the front end from these non-competes and insurance problems and snafus. So to the doctor who's on the front end, we have to set ourselves up with an exit strategy. To the doctor who's already in that environment, really challenging just how limited your options are. Because the reality is you're somebody smart enough to have gotten through medical school and to take care of patients. You are also smart enough to find something you can do for whatever time frame. And you're smart enough, even if you can't relocate, because a lot of us can, like we can just get up and move, and that's a loss for the community. So I would say from a global healthcare perspective, that's really dangerous from a non-compete standpoint, but it is a doable thing. And for people who can't relocate, like there are other options. You could potentially do telemedicine, you could do pharma, you could do something else for a year or 2 years until you're not constrained by those legal parameters. And you could decide what you want to do when you're not.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you could please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, we greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next episode.